Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
I want to welcome you to episode 202 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. I'm your host. My name is Chris Hollifield. Thank you so much for downloading the podcast, checking it out, giving it a listen. However you got here, thank you so much. Got a great show. Will Smith from 1320 KFAN Sports Talk Radio joins me. We had a great conversation. We got to find out his story a little bit better, find out kind of what got him into radio. We talk a little bit about sports. You know, I'm not the biggest sports guy out there, so we didn't really dive too deep in that department. I was a little bit nervous when Will reached out to me and told me what he did. But since he's in the radio industry, I was really excited to bring him on and kind of pick his brain a little bit and find out a little bit more about what he's got going on. So I'm going to be jumping into that interview here in just a minute. Got a great episode. I, of course, want to give some love to our sponsors, though. We got a few sponsors for this episode of the podcast. I first want to tell you about Olio, olioskin.com. I want to tell you about a brand new product I actually had the opportunity to test out. It's their beard and face wash. I've been searching high and low for a good beard wash. I have not been able to find one that is made here in Utah, specifically in the Salt Lake Valley. So I was really excited when they told me about this. It's a really great face wash, beard wash. I love it, and it's supposed to be released about January. So you're going to want to check them out. Follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Check out their website, olioskin.com, for this. If you're looking for a good product to wash your beard, help make it nice and soft and manageable. So yeah, Olio Beard, give them some love, olioskin.com. They're on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow them to stay up to date on all of their products. I also want to tell you about Club 50 West. They're a big supporter of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. They're located right downtown at 50 West Broadway. You can check out their website to see a complete lineup of all the comedy, live shows, music. They're online at 50westslc.com. I have to, of course, mention my next live show happening Friday, January 22nd at Club 50 West, right at 50 West Broadway. I have a great evening planned for you. It's going to be the second live show that I've done, so those of you that made it out to the first one, really excited for another live show. This live show is actually sponsored by our friends at Slug Magazine, slugmag.com. Have a great evening with, let's see, who am I going to be chatting with that night? We have Richie T. Stedman, Jay Whitaker, Kat Palmer. So it should be a fun evening. It's only $5. Show starts at 8 o'clock. Make sure to get there, get a table, grab a drink, get some food, bring a friend, get a babysitter for the evening. It will be definitely a fun night. And you can find out more about the live show, the podcast, how to get in touch with me if you want to donate to the podcast. Everything's at iamsaltlake.com, as well as links to subscribe to the podcast as well, all at on the website at iamsaltlake.com. So this interview was recorded at the AMR studios here in Salt Lake City, amr.fm. Many thanks to them. Many thanks to John Farmer. Go check them out. All local music, all the time. amr.fm. So why don't you join me as I chat with Will Smith and find out his story. We also talk sports talk radio and dating here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Will Smith, not the rapper, not the actor.
First time I've heard that before.
First time you've heard that. I wanted to get that out there right from the start.
But seriously, if you have an original Will Smith joke, hit me with it. Because growing up in elementary school in his heyday, the Men in Black movies, Independence Day, it was almost like hell going back to school after the summer because every single person, I saw your movie. You know, so I actually, in elementary and stuff, I would introduce myself as William Smith because then people wouldn't put Will Smith together and it just prevent a whole lot of guff and stuff. So now I love it. I love the name Will Smith, and it's actually been great for me. But growing up, you know, people are insecure. Kids are mean, especially in elementary and junior high. It's like, I'll just introduce myself as William, even though I like to go by Will, just to prevent that joke that I get every single time.
Have you ever complained to your parents and said, "Thanks a lot, Mom and Dad, for naming me after"?
No, not really, because he wasn't super famous. I was born in '87. So he hadn't really had his start, and it's a family name. So.
It could be a worse name, though. I mean, Will Smith. I mean, he was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Come on.
I loved his show growing up. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the whole intro song. Love me some Will Smith. Just got sick of it after a bit because the Independence Day movie started to suck. The Men in Black movie started to suck, and it's like, man, I'm just tired of answering these questions every single time, because the main question I would always get from people is, did your parents name you after Will Smith, the actor, the rapper? It's like, no. So now I say, one day I want Will Smith to, people ask him, hey, were you named after that sports radio host, Will Smith, the white kid from Salt Lake City?
Where did you grow up at?
Kaysville, Utah, the metropolis of Kaysville, Utah in Davis County. White as all get out, no diversity whatsoever. High school, 96% of the kids all went to seminary. Very, very bland white place, but super fun. Met a lot of good people, and I'm thankful for it. I love the place. Safe, you don't have to lock your doors at night. They'd always scare us with, like, in elementary, of like, you guys got to be careful. There's gangs around. There's stranger danger. Watch out for people spray painting. And like, there's no gangs in Kaysville, Utah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Davis County is still pretty low key.
Oh, still low key. Like, my parents still. So I grew up for about 7 years in a house, moved in Kaysville, moved 2 blocks, and I lived there till I was 19. So I spent 19 years of my life in a 2-block radius in downtown Kaysville, Utah.
Did you come from a typical Utah-sized family?
Oh, yeah. Mormon. All my family still very active in the church. 6 kids. My little brother just got back from his mission a little while ago from Seoul, South Korea. So yeah, I'm the black sheep of the family. When I just considered going on a mission, went to the missionary prep when I was about 20. I was like, I'm going to give it a go just to make sure I don't have any regrets.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, but like when you grow up, it's like that's what you're told all the time. It's like when you turn 19, you serve a mission. That's what you do. So I was 19. I was like, nope, I'm not going to that. As soon as I was 18, as my parents said, no, I'm done with going to church. 20th started, thinking about it. So I didn't even tell my parents I was going. And so I just went to mission prep for like a month. And then after that, I was like, yep, now I know that is not for me. It's for some people, but it was not for me one bit. And so it was kind of a little bit of strife in the family for a bit. But one day I just told my mom, hey, do you want me to still be part of the family? Do you want to still hang out? You still want to talk and have me come to family gatherings? You need to let it go. You can't keep trying to say, hey, come back to church. Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. So after that, my mom and dad are both great about it. Never really bring it up. My grandma, on the other hand, she still tries to bring it up every so often. So
you're pretty close to your parents still, for the most part.
Yeah. I'm still really close to my parents and my family. They've always been a great support, even though I didn't quite do things the way that they wanted to, and really gave them hell as a kid.
Sure.
They tell me to do one thing, it's like, okay, I got to do the exact opposite thing. So they give me a little bit of leeway, and of course, instead of an inch, I take 16 miles.
What were you like as a kid, though? Were you a good kid?
I was a great kid. I was the most well-behaved kid till about 6th grade.
And what happened?
I went to the spectrum class for like advanced students. The most misbehaved, just like jackass kids I've ever met. And they're all super smart, but every single one of them was mouthy, back talk, all this stuff. It's like, wow, I've never seen the kids do this before, talk to a teacher that way and stuff. And so I didn't start that like after that, but then I started like, okay, I don't have to do every single thing, a teacher tells me. And then also in 6th grade, I fell for Y2K, of course. So I stopped doing all my schoolwork. It's like, the world's going to end. The world's going to end.
But where did you get that from, though? Like, what, your home life? Was it saying the Y2K?
No, the news. I was a news junkie growing up. Like, I was a news junkie. I loved watching the news, the local news, and that was blasted, of course, because if it bleeds, it leads. If there's something scary out there, the Ebola virus is coming. They got to put that all over, front and center. So I would just hear that from every place. My parents weren't like way into it or anything, but I just saw it. And I was like, well, they wouldn't be putting this all over the place if it wasn't true. 12-year-old kid.
So you heard about Y2K and you're like, well, screw it. I don't need to do my homework.
Yeah, so
because the world is going to end.
Yeah, I stopped doing all my schoolwork. I stopped doing all my math homework and everything. And then Y2K, New Year's Eve, click, click, click. Nothing happens. Like, oh, damn, I'm behind now. I got to get going again.
Yeah. And you caught up?
Yeah, I caught up a little bit, but then I kind of, stayed that way. I wasn't a huge fan of going to school or, doing my homework and stuff like that. I would always try to find the ways around it and still pass the class. So I'd probably spend more time finding ways around actually doing the homework than doing the homework. I had math teachers that would say, 10% of your grade is homework, 90% of your grades are the tests and quizzes. So I was like, 10% of my grades homework? I don't have to do any of it then. And so that's what I would do.
So would you say, you mentioned watching the news and watching all that. I want to get into pretty quickly here, radio. Because that's what you do or what you're involved in now. 1320 AM.
Yep.
An AM channel.
AM channel.
People still listen to AM radio.
Yeah, AM radio's still around. People are surprised all the time. As long as I keep putting car radios in cars, AM radio, sports talk, it's going to be good.
Sure.
Music, and I work with a cluster of 6-7 different radio stations.
What radio? Do you care to plug them all? Or
yeah. So it's Cumulus. So Alt 1019, Cable 93, K-Bear. KCAT.
So you're in the same building there?
Yeah, 94.9 The Vibe. They just
I know where
up.
that is. Yeah.
So over about Third West,
right over by RC Willie.
Right across the street from RC Willie. So I work with a great group of people over there. I love the people. It's really fun. It's always been my dream to do radio. I used to have a job that I hated, driving around all the time. So I'd just listen to radio all the time because it was different. It was fresh. It was talk, and I'd get tired of listening to the same music. So I would listen to talk radio, and when I really fell in love with talk radio, I was working with my uncle doing roofing, and I was in 8th or 9th grade in junior high. And I'd listen to sports talk radio all the time because that's what my dad would do at that point in time. And then I found Radio from Hell. And so my uncle was listening to that. It was during the summer. We'd go do roofing, and I fell in love with it. So I'd listen to it every single day. And if I missed it, I'd download the podcast and listen to that while I was driving around. So I decided, well, I like radio and I like sports. Let's see if I can make something of that and make a career out of it and get paid to do something like that. And after many, many years, I finally actually make my living off doing radio.
How long have you been there then?
So I've worked at a couple different radio stations before. So I started off when I was about 20. I got an internship with 1280 The Zone, and I worked there for about 4 years. And the Utah Jazz bought the station because they needed a signal, and they were tired of renting the signal they currently have, which the signal they had was 1320, and they were just renting it from the company. So they bought their own signal, $3.5 million, and then they ended up laying me off, and I was devastated. I thought, oh man, it's impossible. Radio is a tough gig to make, and it's so competitive.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I'm gonna have to move states or something. But luckily, Cumulus decided, well, let's get 1320 going again. And my old boss that I was an intern for way back in the day, Kevin Graham, he came back up from Phoenix and started this radio station up again. So we started it from ground zero, scratch. And I thought getting laid off when fired from 1280, whatever you want to call it. They actually technically never called and let me know that I was fired. They just pretty much said, yeah, don't show up anymore. But the boss never told me I was fired or anything. He just had an interview with me and then kind of just gave me the cold shoulder after that. And I thought, man, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It turned out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me, because instead of being 10th on the totem pole, stacked on a station, I moved right up and was, the number 3 guy. So I was producing an afternoon show with Kevin Graham and Kyle Gunther, and I did that for a bit. Then Kevin Graham went and took over WEI in Boston. He's the program manager over there. So we had a new boss come in, and then he didn't really get along with the show host, so he went to mornings, and he took me with him. And then I parlayed that into kind of co-hosting with him. Then they didn't renew his contract, and then boom. Who else is there to do it? And I'd always kind of run things before. I was the assistant program director. So it's right place, right time. And so I've been doing the show right now, hosting the mornings on 1320 from 6 to 10 for about 4 months now.
Okay, so you're pretty new over there. You're pretty new at 1320.
I've been there for 3 years.
Oh, but you've been hosting the show.
Yeah.
For
Well, I was a producer.
Okay.
I was a producer. I was the assistant program director. I did all the behind the scenes stuff. And then finally, I got the dream is actually, being on air all the time. So about September-ish, I took over as the main host before I was the second chair.
Okay.
So now I'm the lead chair, and for a lot of people that doesn't mean anything, but it's big, when you're doing a two-man show, going from the lead to the second chair from the lead. In the second chair, like we are right now, you have to lead the show, keep it kind of on track, ask the questions, and I can just be myself, joke around. It's a lot less pressure, a lot more easy flowing. I could be goofier. On the other side, in the lead host chair where I'm at now, I've kind of got to stick to the plan a little bit more and be the one that brings it back on track, and instead of being the guy that was the distraction, saying weird, wacky stuff all the time.
So how would you describe your morning show then? 6 to 10, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, 6 to 10.
Every day you're on.
Yeah, 4 hours every day.
Is it just sports?
Yeah, it's sports. I also like to talk about my life a lot, my lack of dating life, Tinder stories. I'm a pretty open book.
Well, hey, okay, we're going to get into that. Tinder stories.
Oh, yeah.
I got to hear some Tinder stories.
Okay, okay. Tinder, crazy place.
Well, in a second, let's talk. I'm going to make a note of that. Don't let me forget that.
Okay, we'll get back to that.
We actually, I had an episode, Jackson Banks. I don't know if you're familiar with Jackson Banks, a stand-up comedian. He actually, we got on Tinder when he was in here one time, and he was actually trying to match with somebody. Anyway, long story.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Anyway, so sports, you talk about your life, 13:20 a.m. So people, if you're listening, turn that car dial over to the AM.
It's still there. It is
possible to do that.
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's talk AM versus FM. What's the difference?
So AM, it's not as good of a signal.
So why wouldn't you just go FM then?
Well, because it's hard to get an FM signal. So we're already on the AM side. So a lot of sports stations are going FM because it's in stereo instead of mono. So a lot of sports stations are trying to get that FM signal, have the steadier signal going out there. But it's tough to move over to that part when you've been on the AM side for so long. Signals are expensive. They have already kind of the set music there. So it's hard to kind of bring it along. But a lot of in the bigger markets, they've started moving over to the FM side.
I gotcha. Do you like any of the other radio stations, like the guys from K-Bear, ever come in and laugh at you? Look at that silly AM station.
No, not really.
I'm kidding.
Not really. But I've worked at previous companies where there was a kind of a not a strife or anything, but there's a split. There's definitely like, hey, we're the music guys, you're the sports talk guys. You guys are the guys that get paid to talk sports all day, and they didn't really kind of respect that.
Yeah. Now you actually briefly talked about like you interned for radio. Mm-hmm. Did you go to school at all for radio, or because you went to, what did you go to school for?
So I went to school. I went to Slick for a while, and then I realized, because I started talking to some people, I realized even if you have your communications and your broadcasting degree, you're still gonna have to start at the very bottom.
Sure.
And they really don't teach you that much of, hey, this is the on the job, this is what you need to do each and every day, these are the inner workings of a radio station. They give you some basics on interviewing and broadcasting and how to talk and stuff, but I there was a lot of kids when, after I got my internship that would come straight out of school and they'd have their degrees and say, where's my job?
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, get your internship. And then maybe after your internship, you'll be able to parlay that into a part-time job, then parlay that into a board hopping job, and then maybe get on air one day.
Because I would love to get into radio. Mm-hmm. That's like, I don't know, I see that as like the kid that wakes up Christmas morning, that happiest face. That's how I envision it. I'm sure people listening are like, Chris, it's not that glamorous. And I know it's not. I mean, I've visited plenty of radio stations. I've talked to plenty of radio DJs. I know but it's something I would love. Yeah. It's something I would like and enjoy doing. What would you recommend? What would you recommend a step for me to take in that direction? Or would you say, Chris, don't do it, just keep doing the podcast?
If you want to do radio, man, go for it. Find a radio station you like. Find a show that you think is a good radio show, someone that you would want to learn from, and get an internship there. So I actually tried to get an internship with Radio from Hell, and they told me, maybe you should go over to the sports station. We're not really interested in you.
Sure.
So I ended up going to the sports station. I got an internship there on the afternoon show, and then I just worked my way up from there. So,
yeah, but Radio from Hell is so early.
It is. But right now I get up at 4 a.m. every day. So it's early, but it was something that I really loved and I really wanted to do, because I don't want to work a regular 9-to-5 job all the time. I want to do something that I really love, and there's a lot of work that goes into it, but that's what I wanted to do. So I set my mind to it. I tried to get that internship with Radio from Hell. So they were in the same company as 1280 The Zone at the time with Simmons Media that used to own it. Now they've sold it. It's moved on past there.
It's Broadway.
Yeah,
Media.
Broadway Media. Yeah, downtown. They now they have like Call 700 as a sports station, and it's so I tried to get that internship there. It didn't really work out. So they said, hey, there's a sports station. We think you'd be perfect for it. Head over there. So Richie sent me over to Jake Scott, who said, okay, yeah, dude, come in on the afternoons. So I actually did the afternoons instead of the mornings. So 5 days a week, I'd come in from 3 or 2 to 6, and I did an internship. And then it's tough after the internship to stick around. So then I moved to the morning show, and I did an internship with the morning show just to kind of keep my face around so people, continued to see me. Because, out of sight, out of mind. And that's how it works a lot of the time, because people get their internship and then kind of just give up. It's like, well, I gave it my best. I did 6 months. There's no jobs for me because it's ultra competitive. So I did an internship on the mornings. Then I did an internship on the midday show. And then I started getting part-time work covering Jazz games, Utah football practices, little odds and ends stuff like 10, 15 hours a week, maybe. And eventually Kevin Graham, the guy that, this shows you what like a small world sports radio is. Kevin Graham, the guy that hired me at 1320 KFAN 3.5 years ago, he was actually the afternoon show host at the time. And I did an internship for him. Then I did the mornings and then middays. Then he actually left to take a job in Phoenix. So the guy that was producing the show moved up to the co-host seat. So they said, well, we need a producer for the show. Well, who's around? Well, Will's here. He's always here. So they gave me the job. They said, okay, don't mess it up. Here's your job. You produce the show every day. Book guests, run the soundboard for it. We play drops, put in cuts from interviews, so we can have sound to play during the show. So after that, I did that for a long time. I've only started hosting as of like the last year and a half or so. So I produced radio for a long time.
Do you have any embarrassing radio stories?
Ooh, so yeah, a lot of embarrassing radio stories. I've never slipped up and, said, the F word or something on air. I just pretend like I'm around my family. So I don't swear around them very much because they're Mormon. So I just kind of do that thing. So it hasn't been that tough, but there's been some embarrassing moments on the radio. I'm trying to think of something in particular.
Anything off the top of your head. And it's funny, you say swear words like on the podcast. I don't care, if people say, but for some reason when I get behind a microphone, I all of a sudden become like the best person in the world.
Yeah, well, because you want to have how you portray your stuff.
But if I'm out on the streets, I sound like a sailor that's been living in the gutter for 3 months without a clean pair of clothes. You know what I mean? Like, well, I just sound filthy.
Yeah, well, I'm the exact same way. Like, I've offended many of people's parents. Like, I actually have a friend and I made a very bad first impression, had a little bit of booze as my buddy's wake, so emotions were high, and her mom showed up. And so I let off a string of F words that, it's like, bleeping this and stuff. And so the next day she's like, I've never heard someone use the F word as a verb, a noun, everything. And so my buddy's like dating her and they're thinking about getting married. And so they're like, yeah, we want Will to officiate the wedding. And her dad's like, nope, he's not even invited to the wedding. Oh. Just because of that first impression. So if you really want me to make a bad first impression, bring me around your parents or something, and I'm bound to make a bad first impression because I get around my friends and stuff, and it's
what are you doing on Sunday? You want to meet my mom?
yeah. Let's meet your mom, man.
So no, embarrassing stories. There's got to be something, just something. I just anything. Think about it for a second. I'll even tighten this up here. We'll cut away the dead air if we need to.
Embarrassing. Okay, so a lot of embarrassing stories happen like when I go out and interview athletes and stuff.
So you'll actually go out like
cover a Jazz game
with like a handheld recorder, like we were talking about, like with the Zoom recorder. Go to a Jazz game and talk to a Jazz player.
Yeah, so I used to smoke cigars and stuff. So I showed up to cover a Jazz practice, and it was an afternoon one for some reason. And I smoked a cigar beforehand, and you get in this media huddle. So there's like 5-6 guys around there, and I'm interviewing Carlos Boozer. And Carlos Boozer's a jerk. He's not a pleasant guy one bit. He's fake. And like a lot of the NBA players
You heard it here first.
A lot of the NBA players are. Darren Williams, the biggest asshole you will ever meet. The guy just doesn't care about anybody but himself. So I'm in there in the circle with Carlos Boozer, and he's like, who's been smoking? And he stops the whole entire interview and says, "Who's been smoking? Who's been smoking?" And everyone immediately points to me and sells me out. And then he gives me this speech about how I need to quit smoking. And everyone's just laughing, having a grand old time. I had an incident with Kevin O'Connor, the former Jazz GM. It was like the first press conference I ever covered. And he was saying, well, we're waiting for an injury update on Carlos Boozer at the time. It's in the Pacific time zone, so the times aren't matching up. He was just, it was a lot of BS. So I just kind of rolled my eyes and started shaking my head. Well, he saw that because I was about 5 feet from him, not the most respectful thing to do. I was young at the time. So he stops it and he says, "You got a problem?" And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, no problem, man. And this is all recorded. So of course, when I go to work the next day, they pull this and play it back on the radio and, poke fun at me and, mock me a bit. So I was just kind of, he's an intimidating guy. So I was just like, oh man, I really messed that up. And so after I went up to him, I said, "Sorry about that. My hair was in my eyes. I had long hair." And I came up with the worst excuse ever. I was like, "I was just trying to get the hair out of my eyes. Like, that's why." He's like, "Yeah, okay." And then just cut it off right there. And it was cold ever since then. So now whenever I go cover Jazz events, most of the writers and the other radio guys that are there were there for that moment. So they always bring it up to me.
So are you like every Jazz game? Do you go to
not as much as I used to. So when I first was getting my start, I used to cover a lot of Jazz games.
Sure.
Because
that's all we have here. Really,
yeah. So
I mean?
I'd go cover Jazz games, get sound, bring it back for the shows in the morning. So I covered a lot. Now I don't cover quite as bit just because getting up way early, it makes it tough to go to the game. Then you have to wait till about 30 minutes or so after the game finally finishes for the players to shower, change or whatever, and then they do their post-game interviews then. And so, getting up at 4, it makes it tough. So I don't cover as many as I used to, but those are probably the most embarrassing and interesting moments because when someone calls you out or puts you on the spot like that, and especially when I was young, when it's like Kobe Bryant or Darren Williams.
Well, because you're supposed to be the professional one. You're supposed to be the reporter. You're supposed to be on your game.
Yeah, but this happens probably to you when you're doing a podcast.
Sure.
You ask somebody a question and maybe they give you like a 1 or 2 word answer and maybe catches you off guard a little bit. You're like, especially when I was young first getting into it. I had an interview with Kobe, and I asked him one question, then I asked another question, and then he stopped me and said, "Hey, man, wrap it up. I'm not going to be here all night." after 2 questions. So I was like, sorry, man. I was just trying to ask you some questions. He's like, no problem. I just got to get going.
Yeah.
So it just kind of catches you off guard when people are so blunt and stuff like that. And you're young, you're trying to work things out, and it's totally different when you're seeing this guy that you've watched on TV for 10 years, he's in commercials, he's all over the place, and you're face to face with this guy, he's 6'5", 6'6". You're trying to ask him some questions, and I'm a dumpy white guy that's never played a high school basketball game in my life. I just love sports. I'm not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination. So just sometimes they just call you straight out on your questions. It's like, no, it's like, man, I thought that was a good question. They shut it down so quick. It's like, damn, that sucked.
Well, and it could have been a good question for the next person as well.
Yeah.
Who have you met that you've just been starstruck, that you've just been like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm sure you've chatted with a lot of different sports people.
So in real life,
sure, in real life, yeah.
So like
I've done
fake life. Well, I'm talking like doing interviews, like doing one on the radio over the phone. So
let's say face to face.
Yeah, so face to face. When I first started out, I grew up as a huge Jazz fan. So when I first was around these NBA players that I'd watched for a long time, pretty much all of them, Jerry Sloan, like. That for me is like, man,
you had an opportunity to interview him.
Yeah. So he'd always do press availability, before the games, he'd practices. So you'd have a chance to go and talk to him. And I remember the first time I met Jerry, and he has a real dry sense of humor. And and just how he handles his interviews and stuff, very blunt, and sometimes he'll be in a little bit joking, sarcastic, dry mood, so he'll give you a little bit more. But I remember the first time I met him, I went up after him and I was like, man, you've got a great sense of humor. You're a funny guy. And I was just kind of trying to break the ice, talk about something that's not talked about all the time. And he says to me, "What sense of humor? What are you talking about?" And he was still joking, and he just said, "Yeah, and have a good day." And it's just kind of ended right there.
How can I get Jerry on the podcast?
I would say Jerry's actually a super good dude. There's crazy stories about him, like driving around in a 16-passenger van. So he used to drive a 16-passenger van all around Salt Lake. And this lady
just by himself.
Yeah, just by himself. So this lady one day thought he was the airport van, and she flags Jerry down. Jerry stops, picks her up, and takes her to the airport. Like Jerry's a good dude. He's just, in the professional setting, he's not going to give you as much. But you meet him on the streets and you go up and talk to him, he's going to talk to you. So I'd say stock a Jazz game.
Stock a Jazz game. Maybe you guys heard it here. I'm going to get Jerry on the podcast.
Another moment.
That's the goal.
Another moment that just came to my mind is I was about 20 or so, and I was watching the Jazz game, and I was at my home at the time, and they used to let you text in to the K-Jazz show. So Thurl Bailey was there, and it was an away game. So on an away game, they all just wear suit coats, and they wear sweatpants and like white shoes because only the tops are showing on the broadcast desk. So so the camera angle was bad. So his sweatpants and his big old white shoes were hanging out the side. It's like, oh man, I thought it was so funny. So I texted in, and I said, your shitty white shoes are showing, or something like that. And so I get this call like 5 minutes later from a blocked number. And I was like, oh. And so I answer, and whose voice is it? Thurl Bailey's. Thurl Bailey calls me, and I'm hanging out in my basement in Bountiful, and he said, would you kiss your mom with that mouth? I was like, I was just joking, man. Just, I was just joking. And he said, I thought, it wasn't funny, all this stuff. And so they were poking fun, like the other guys on the set were poking fun at him for that after, and they did a little thing at the very end. I actually went up and talked to him at a Jazz game after that and said, hey, I introduced myself, and I made sure the table was in between us. Just in case. You never know what's going to happen. So he said, I made sure the table was in between us, and I said, hey, I introduced myself. I was like, you called me. I was the guy that texted in and made fun of your white shoes. And he says, step around the desk and talk to me. What are you afraid? So I stepped around the desk and talked to him, and he's actually, super cool about it, and just said, I didn't appreciate the language.
So you do a sports talk radio, obviously.
Yeah.
Do you have to keep up on all the sports? I mean, the footballs, the basketballs, the baseballs, the hockey.
So in this market, it's NBA, college football, the NFL, and a little bit of baseball, like during the World Series, but this isn't a big baseball market.
So you don't do like the local baseball? Any of the smaller, the Grizzlies or the hockey?
The Grizzlies are on our station, so we do an interview like once a week with them. But no, we don't like. Not a slight at minor league sports to the Grizzlies, but 5,000 people show up to their games. We're trying to get to a broader audience than that. So you do a 10, 15-minute segment on Grizzlies hockey, turn a lot of people out because just in this market, people just aren't into it. So we focus. College football is huge here, and that's what, at 1320 we're the football station. So we talk Utah, BYU, a little bit of Utah State here and there, a lot of NFL football, and then when the Jazz season starts to get into full swing, we do that. And then college basketball as well. The local college teams, BYU and Utah, they carry this market. There's only one pro franchise in the Jazz, and our competitors, they're owned by the Jazz. So we're not going to beat them going head to head with Jazz talk or Jazz So they get the coaches on all the time, the broadcasters on all the time. So to be competitive with that, we take a little bit different approach, and we really focus in on BYU and Utah, the college sports. We still talk the Jazz, but we don't make that our primary goal. I remember sitting in a meeting when we were sold to the Jazz, and this was before they had laid me off. And the guy said, we're the Jazz station. So after the Jazz game the next day, we need you to be talking Jazz basketball. And of course, they bought that radio station as an advertising vehicle for the Utah Jazz. So they're able to sell sponsorships, talk about the Jazz all the time, do that. So, we kind of figured it out. We got to do something a little bit different if we want to be successful, stay around and try to compete.
You were talking about pro, sports, pro franchise. I've chatted about this in the past. I mean, come on, let's just talk briefly on it here. Football, baseball. Do you ever see that coming to Salt Lake?
Baseball, probably not. Just with that huge schedule, I think it'd be tough for this market to support.
Really? But why? I guess I just don't see it.
It's so many games. Yeah. It's so many games every single year. When you're playing over 160 games, and so half of those are at home, that's a lot of games for people to be showing up for all the time. And we don't really have the corporate money. A lot of these franchises, these pro teams, they make a lot of money off selling suites. and advertisements to big corporations, big car dealerships, all of that. So it'd just be tough doing that with baseball for how many games. I think one day we could support an NFL franchise. You have 8 home games a year, and people in Utah, they'll go out to a football game on a Sunday. You get a 40, 50,000 seat stadium. BYU and Utah fans can come together, and that's what happens with the Jazz. They come together, they watch the Jazz. I think we could support an NFL franchise eventually.
But maybe in 10 years, we might have some Major League
Salt Lake's
Baseball.
growing like crazy.
I mean, it's. I don't know. I think we could do it here. I'm not a big sports guy. I mean, I'm going to lay that on the table. I haven't laid that on the table with you yet, but I'm not really the biggest sports guy. I've actually never even been to a Jazz game as of this recording. That's what's funny. I've had a few friends say, hey, come with me sometime, and just never have made it work. I've lived in Utah over 20 years, never been to a Jazz game in my life. I'd love to go, but it's not really my top priority.
Yeah.
Baseball, I love baseball, though. I mean, it reminds me of summertime, get a hot dog and smell the fresh cut grass, it's fun to me. So that's why I like to go to a local Bees game. That's fun. But I'd like to see some Major League.
Yeah, I try to go to some NFL games, once a year. Check out. I was just up in Seattle. I saw Seattle. They were taking on the 49ers. So that was a pretty cool game. 49ers fans are just as bad as everyone says. They're likes to fight guy all the time. They're just looking for a fight everywhere. I'm standing in line looking for getting a hot dog with cream cheese on it. I was just talking to this random guy who's another Seahawks fan. I was like, man, I have the worst luck going to NFL games. I always see the backup quarterbacks because the 49ers benched their starting quarterback for a backup in Blaine Gabbert, and he was starting that game. This 49ers fan, she was probably 45, all liquored up, turns around and just starts getting in my face. And I'm not looking for a confrontation. I don't know.
She wanted to fight you.
Yeah, I'm a grown man. And I was just like, I wasn't talking. Yeah, but you're talking loud enough so I could hear you. It's like, yeah, we're 2 feet away from each other in line. And so the guy that was selling hot dogs, it's funny, he just like gave the boozing sign, does the hand signal, like, yeah, she's liquored up, dude. Just take a step back. So I just ignored her, but she was just looking for a fight. And you hear about 49ers fans all the time getting in fights outside the stadium. For heck's sake, they got in a fight outside the Buffalo Wild Wings against a rival fan base. Pro sports are crazy, especially when you get the alcohol involved. There's not quite as much in the college sports because you can't buy booze at most college stadiums. But in the NFL, you're tailgating. It's a totally different atmosphere. So there's more liquor, there's more fights, there's more guys that are trying to get away from their home life. So it's like I got 4 or 5 hours to be away from my wife and kids. I'm going to turn up, and so things get a little bit out of control with them.
Besides sports. Mm-hmm. Other hobbies and interests. What are some other things that you enjoy spending your time with besides sports and radio?
So I honestly, I love sports and stuff, but after work and going home, I'm a huge fan of quality TV shows.
So you don't go turn the game on TV?
Well, I'll watch the games because I have to watch the games. Sure. So I'll still watch
work.
It. Yeah. So and that's the thing. It kind of changes for you when you get into it. It's still fun and everything, but then it still works. So if it's been a crazy hectic day, I'll unwind and watch an episode of Fargo.
Is that a good show? I haven't watched that yet.
It's a very, very good show.
I've heard nothing but good about it.
Yeah, the new season's crazy. They won't give away any spoilers, but they got a great cast, a great bunch of actors. So I love the show. I love quality TV shows like that, whether it's the dramas or the comedies. But those series that's what I really like. I'm a huge fan of music. I love music. I used to go to a lot of concerts and live shows. Not so much anymore because they all start so late. So now I got to be somewhat responsible.
Now you're an old man.
Yeah, I can't be going out and getting drunk on a weekday night and then waking up in the morning. It's like, trying to do radio hungover. Yeah, that's the worst. And I've had to do that a couple times. Hopefully my bosses aren't listening. But yeah, I've had to do that a couple of times. And it's hard for that brain to function after a crazy night. And, when you're doing talk radio and you're doing 15, 20-minute segments at a time, your brain doesn't function so well on that. So I've had to cool it down. I used to love to go out all the time, but now it's not so much. I try to be somewhat responsible occasionally.
I've been there plenty of times.
Yeah.
I'm sick of hating my life every day. So you're like, okay, life isn't that bad. Quit drinking, Chris. on a Monday or Tuesday,
Yes.
and
because like there's nothing worse than waking up at 4 a.m. with a hangover and just thinking, man, I gotta puke before I go to work or something like that.
well, especially your profession.
Yeah.
If you had a different profession where you're in the corner just putting labels on a box, or not talking to anybody, not even seeing anybody, but you got to talk to people. You're live on the air. You gotta talk.
Well, and that's what creates like an interesting dynamic in an environment, because most people can go to their workplace and type on their computer and do whatever, not to talk to anybody. Doing sports talk radio, you're in a room with maybe one or two other people for 4 hours, and you have to have a conversation with them. So you're going back and forth the whole entire time. You got to be moving. You got to be thinking quick. So that leads to some interesting moments, especially, you get heated about a discussion, and, one person believes this thing, another person believes this thing. And there's a lot of egos, of course. You get up there, you get on air, you think you're really hot shit, but you're just another guy like everyone else. So that's one thing. I've seen a lot of huge egos, a lot of guys just puff out the hot air all the time, and you disagree with them, and they just get so defensive and come at you. So I've definitely seen some not any like fist fights, but some awkward moments and some back and forth between grown men. And that's a little bit uncomfortable when you see two grown men, and this usually happens in the break. So you go to breaks in the breaks.
Wait, during the radio, you will see that happen.
Yeah. So in the breaks on talk radio, they're actually some of the best like back and forth. Like if you could have just like a live cam in there, because
you need to periscope it.
Yeah, something like that. So they hit the off switch, you play the commercials, and then you'll just see two guys just going at it, like just screaming back and forth, and it gets heated. I've seen guys storm out of their room before. I've been on shows before where the two hosts didn't even talk to each other except for on the air. They hated each other that much, or they wouldn't even spend like the breaks, the 5-minute breaks together. As soon as those lights would go off, and as soon as you're off air, one host would head out the door, go down the hall, chill there for 3 minutes, and then come back. So you get some weird dynamics, and people definitely, like you said, when you turn on the mics, you try to present something or maybe portray something that you're not going to do when you're hanging out with your friends.
Yeah.
So that happens a lot too, because, especially with men, they don't like to look dumb. So, you make some points, a guy feels dumb, his ego's maybe a little bit hurt. The Mo's mics go off, and it's just F word after F word, and, you're the worst, and just heated screaming back and forth. Like, man, are these 12-year-old, 16-year-old kids throwing a temper tantrum and throwing stuff, or are these two grown men?
Tinder dating stories.
Oh, okay.
We chatted about it at the beginning. You thought I was going to forget?
No.
I got to hear one or two.
Okay, so
or are you the king of them?
No, I'm not the king of them. I always go back and forth on Tinder. Like it's like, okay, yeah, I'm single. It's like, let's get out there and mingle.
Sure, man, you got to get on there.
Yeah, and then you have a weird experience. Like, okay, I'll delete this. So I go back and forth of being on Tinder and not being on Tinder. One time, so I meet this girl on Tinder. We meet up, and it turns out that I'm not going to mention his name, but turns out her dad is one of my coworkers. And it's like, oh, okay, where's the exit plan right here? So we don't
wait. How did you find that out, though?
She told me. She said
right from the start.
Yeah, she's
not even in the messages back and forth.
No. So she's like, what do you do? And I told her I work at a sports station. She's like, oh, do you know my dad? And I was like, yeah, I do. He actually works right down the hall from me. So that was an interesting occasion. Definitely.
Did you kiss her?
Oh yeah. Mom, don't listen to this part. Yeah. So she.
We don't have to go.
No,
there.
It's cool. It's cool. So she.
So you finished the date with her.
Yeah. Oh, so we went out and we talked for a bit, and one thing led to another, and she says, "Hey, you down with toys?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess. What are you thinking?" And so she pulls out a certain toy, and I was just like, oh, what did I just get myself into? After that, it was
like an adult toy.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's an adult toy, a sex toy.
Okay.
And she pulled out a sex toy, and I was expecting, maybe like
you're driving around. You're in your car
like
at this point.
No, I was actually at my house.
At your house
at the time.
Wait, you're at your house. She pulls it out of her purse.
Yes. So she carries this around everywhere with her, and I was expecting maybe like a vibrator or something like that.
Wait, so it's not. I'm thinking a vibrator.
No.
What was it?
More than that.
Do you want to say what it is? You can't say what it is. A hint.
A plug.
A
plug. And after that happened, I was just like, yep, this is not for me. I thought I was a little bit freaky, but she just took it to a whole new level. And after that happened, I was just trying to find an escape plan. Just how can I get out of this? Like, oh, I'm feeling pretty tired right now. I guess my mom's calling me. That's a joke, but it's like I was just trying to find a way out after that because it went from a 10 to like a 50 on the extreme level with pulling something out of her purse. Like, and I was thinking, man, she carries it around all the time, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happens a lot. A lot of first dates on Tinder, and then not a lot of second dates because you've talked back and forth with people. But just like in radio or doing a podcast, when you're talking back and forth with someone, you're trying to hook up or whatever, you're trying to portray something. You're trying to have this person see me as this and the dating back and forth. So when you actually meet them in real life and they don't have very many social skills or, they're just awkward or weird. And I'm awkward or weird. So.
We all are.
Yeah.
We're all awkward.
So a lot of first dates, not a lot of second dates. But the crazy thing is I actually know people that I've met on Tinder and gotten married off of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Ryan Prince, who co-hosted the podcast, a handful of episodes with me, his sister, I believe it was, met her husband from Tinder. Yeah. I've met some great relationships from Tinder. Mm-hmm. I mean, Tinder's actually been one of the better online dating apps for me.
Yeah. So we joke around. We call it going down the wormhole. You do it on the internet, you do it on Facebook, you start clicking a few things, then all of a sudden you're 6 friends deep, someone you've never met before looking at their pictures.
Sure.
So, yeah, we joke around about all that, that all the time is, this is probably weird, but I'll see somebody that's in the news, like, that got arrested or, whatever they did. They committed some huge crime, and I'm like, what can I find out about this person? I bet they have a Facebook profile. So I'll Google their name, and boom, there's their Facebook profile and everything about their life, and it's like,
oh, it's so easy to find people on Facebook.
So that's one that's probably one thing that's strange. I do. I see, I go to KSL and I see this guy kidnapped 3 kids. So do a quick Google search to find out, what's this guy about? Because you see people in the news for the heinous crimes and everything like that. It's like, man, how did they get to become that person? Did they have a mom? Did they have a dad? Did they have family members? So it's just a weird, like a little intriguing thing for me to stalk them or go down that wormhole.
So you're a Facebook stalker. I like it. That's a hobby.
I'm ready to. I'll admit that. Instagram, Twitter. I'll go down the wormhole.
So how much stalking did you do of me?
I did a little bit of stalking of you. I looked into you a little bit, but you haven't committed any crimes, so I didn't go that far down.
And how do you know that? How do you know that?
Oh, I don't know for sure, but nothing like that's going to pop up immediately in the news search on Google, like, this guy's wanted in 3 states for, fraud.
Yeah. Well, shoplifting. That's all I've been arrested for.
Oh, yeah. I've only been arrested for one thing. One thing, and that was high school. And I thought it was going to be a good idea to egg a bunch of teachers' houses. Didn't turn out so well. My mom's a teacher, so she has a book of every single teacher's address in Davis County from the Davis School District. So I go through with me and some buddies, and we pick out like 7-8 teachers that we didn't particularly care for. And on a Friday night, this was way back in the day, so we printed out like map quests of where they lived, and we went and found all these places. Well, we ended up getting busted for it. The cop said to my buddy, like, hey, yeah, we saw you. You're caught red-handed, and they didn't know anything really. They just had maybe a little bit of a hunch, and he admitted to everything. So cop shows up at my house, my mom's proudest moment, and says, we caught you for this, we're going to have a court date. So I ended up getting charged with 7 Class B misdemeanors.
Whoa.
1 for each house. Had to do 30 days of house arrest. 30
ankle
days of
bracelet,
house arrest.
the whole 9 yards.
No ankle bracelet, so it was the juvenile detention system. So they just come and check on you all the time. Like twice a day, some people would randomly show up at your house and check on you. And then you'd have to call in 3 times a day and say, yep, I'm at my house. I could only leave to go to work or if I was going somewhere with my parents. And when I'd leave with my parents, I'd have to call in and say, hey, this is where I'm going. This is how long I'll be gone for. And then as soon as I got back, I had to call them again. So, yeah, 30 days of house arrest for
that straightened you right up. That straightened you up.
No, it didn't. It didn't one bit. Just made me angry at the system. The man holding me down.
What is your most memorable concert or sporting event? You talked to like music and you like sports. I mean, is there one in there that sticks out?
Oh, yeah. So for sports, very easy. I still remember the first game when I became like a sports fan when I was hooked on college football. 1996, the Pigskin Classic, BYU versus Texas A&M. My grandpa had season tickets, and he would take me to the games, and he took me to this game, and it was a huge game. The Pigskin Classic used to be a bigger game. It was the first game of every football season to kind of kick it off nationally. So BYU is playing Texas A&M, and there was a crazy finish. Texas A&M was ranked at the time. The fans went crazy. I think I was probably, this was 1996, so what was I, like 9 at the time? So I was like 9 at the time. And after that, just the atmosphere, the crazy back and forth, I was hooked. And I went to most of those games with my grandpa that season. They ended up going to the Cotton Bowl, finishing 13-1. It was a pretty epic season. Steve Sarkisian was the quarterback of the team, the former USC head coach that got fired for drinking on the job. So he was the quarterback of BYU at the time. So it was a great team, epic season. And after that, I was like, I love this. My grandpa always had season tickets. That's how we bonded together. And we'd drive down to every game. We'd go to the little Cougar Club functions beforehand. So that right there is how I got like hooked on sports, and like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I really like this, because I'd been to games before, but I was always so young I didn't really remember it or anything. Concert wise, I saw Nas at the Depot. He only played 40 minutes. He was just by himself, no openers, just a DJ, and he killed it. One of the best concerts I've ever been to. I've seen, so I saw Dylan once at the Great Saltaire. That was pretty sweet, because once I was in high school, I was just, I got to listen to everything. I got to read his book. I got to find everything out about Robert Zimmerman. So yeah. I went in, I just, I dove into that, and then, my musical taste changed over the years, from junior high, I listened to Anti-Flag and Propaganda and all that, like thinking, oh man, the man's holding me down. And then I started listening to more alternative rock, and I really got into Modest Mouse. And so I dove into that. I saw them at UVU, and their concerts are always great. We tried to go see them at Twilight one year, but there's like 30,000 people, and everyone was pushing down the fences. It was insane. So we were like, okay, we better go.
You grew up in the area, so let's talk Salt Lake City for a little bit here. What would you change if you could change something about Salt Lake City? Anything.
If I could change anything about Salt Lake City, liquor laws. Let's have the liquor stores open more often. Be able to get liquor at a grocery store. Shows you my hobby right there. Anything else? I love Salt Lake. There's not much I would change about it, because it's a different little cluster than every other spot in Utah. It's totally different than Davis County. So Salt Lake in general, I think is awesome. And whenever I go to other places and people are like, oh, you're from Utah? How do you have long hair? How do you have a beard? How are you swearing? How'd you get fined for that? It's like, no, I'm proud to be from Salt Lake. It's an awesome place. You guys should come check it out, because there's so many misconceptions out there about Salt Lake. It's like, oh, the Mormons run this place. You can't get a drink. You can't do anything like that. Everyone's pushing hand carts. So one time I have a bunch of friends up in Boise. So we went up to Boise, and I met this dude from Arkansas, and he was like the only black dude at the bar. We started talking and stuff, and he said, well, I actually came up here because I met a girl online, and we lasted for about a month, and then she kicked me out. So I'm staying at this hotel, and he asked me if we could give him a ride back to Salt Lake because the Greyhound was cheaper. So we brought him back to Salt Lake, and he was just blown away, like, oh, you guys have light rail? These mountains are huge. Yeah. So it was fun just showing him the city, and his eyes were just opened up, because he was from like Massachusetts. He actually spent 5 years in prison in Arkansas. Didn't really get to the bottom of exactly what happened to lead him to prison, but he'd always say, yeah, man, sorry, I'm 5 years behind, because he spent 5 years in prison. So when he got out, he's, all the technology, these new fancy smartphones, like he wasn't like quite sure about it. So we brought him to Salt Lake, and he was just blown away by it. It was, wow, this is a real city. This isn't a Wild West town with dirt roads and everyone's going to their farm. It's like, this is a real city where, people have jobs in high rises. And he was just blown away by everything here. So it's like, I always love trying to introduce or expose people to Salt Lake.
It's an interesting city, and that's kind of even what I'm trying to do here with the podcast is tear down that wall, that perception that people have that it's a goofy city. But favorite local eating spots.
Okay, so
I'm sure you got a couple.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do have a couple. So I love Poplar downtown, just for a good burger, some of their fries. Lucky 13, of course. Their nut butter burger. Let's see, what else do I like? Some of the popular places. You get a good Philly cheesesteak.
Where do you think you can get a good Philly cheesesteak in town?
So the DP cheesesteaks, I don't know if you've ever been there.
I haven't, no.
They have one downtown. They're pretty good. And then the place on 8th South.
Right there, kind of by the Gallivan Center.
Yeah, right there.
DP.
Yeah.
I might have a while back. But Moochie's has always been my favorite.
Yeah, Moochie's is great.
I do the gluten-free thing now. And so it's kind of played a damper on a lot of the burgers and the breads.
So if you eat gluten, your penis will fall off?
No, it's really...
You seen that South Park?
No. Is that what happens?
Yeah. So, gluten causes your penis to fly off.
Yeah, I don't really want to get into it necessarily right now on this episode, but I've noticed some differences that I like, and so I stick with.
Yeah,
it.
you know how South Park is and how they bring stuff up
and I really it's not like I'm one of those like I it's just throwing it out there on the recording of it makes it a little tough because I hear about these great I love the peanut butter burger at Lucky 13, but it's like, gosh, I can't sink my teeth into it because I can't eat it now.
Yeah. So can you eat barbecue? Like what?
Well, from there is some barbecue sauces that aren't.
Yeah, there's a place in Bountiful actually that I love called Smoke and Bones. They have like steak burgers and great brisket, great ribs.
I mean, share away. I mean, everybody who's listening to this podcast obviously isn't gluten free. So.
Yeah. So Smoke and Bones and Bountiful. It's just.
What about Pat's Barbecue?
Actually, never been to Pat's.
Oh my gosh!
I lived 2 blocks from there for like 2 years, and I never went there a single time.
See, that is a place I will give a thumbs up to all day long.
My favorite barbecue spot, and barbecue is getting pretty popular right now in Utah. So my favorite spot's in Bountiful and Smoke and Bones. A guy and his family run it. They have no freezers there. The food's fresh every single day. They only make so much food, then when it's gone, it's gone. So I really love Smoke and Bones.
And where's that at?
It's about 2nd West and 5th South in Bountiful.
Okay.
Yeah, the guy that runs it's awesome. Like it's him and his family that runs it. Like you go in there and he'll like, how's your food doing? I was in there one time and like a guy like was throwing away half of his food and like they came up and was like, was there something wrong with that? How can we throw it? He's like, no, I'm just stuffed and I don't want to take it. I don't want to take it home. But they just have quality food, great service. You go in there, it's friendly. So I love that place.
Let's talk how people can stalk you, how they can find you online. Let's run down that list here.
So Facebook, just William Smith. I'm the only one online, so that's easy to find. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Will Smith KFAN.
How can they find you on Tinder?
Tinder, just William, just William, age 28. So look for me. I think I have a beard in the picture.
Swipe right, ladies.
Yeah, swipe right. I could use some more Tinder matches. It's been slow going lately.
Yeah. So Facebook, Twitter, do you care if I put those links on the show notes on IamSaltLake.com?
Yeah.
To connect with you, 1320 a.m. They can listen to you Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 10
a.m.
10 a.m. Let's talk about this really quick before we wrap this up. Where would you like to go with radio? Where would you like to go with all this? Do you want to just keep doing 1320 here?
Yeah. I would
That's it? You don't want to do ESPN or anything?
No. Once you get up to that level, you start being told what you can and can't say. So, ESPN, they're owned by Disney. There's things you can and can't say. You kind of have, not like, okay, you have to talk about this, you can't say that, but it's a little more corporate. And I work for a massive corporation, but I'm in a smaller market. I love Salt Lake. I'm doing what my dream is. Like, I wanted to host a show here. If my goal is to never have to leave Salt Lake, that I can be employed in radio my entire time here.
I love it. You're a man after my own heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great chatting with you, Will. Anything else you want to add before we cut the recording off here? Anything else you want to chat about? Or, I mean, I know we could probably go for hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been comfortable behind the microphone. I've loved chatting with you. I mean, seriously. Yeah. Anything else you want to?
Nothing off the top of my head. Stay off drugs, kids.
Stay
off drugs. All seriousness. There's the drug problem and the heroin and stuff in Salt Lake. I've lost friends to that shit. Stay off the drugs, kids. Like, serious. And it's crazy how accessible it is these days. And it's one thing to smoke pot, and that's one thing that I was like kind of like thrown off because in Dare they teach you, pot's the exact same as coke and heroin and all this stuff. So growing up, I like, personally, it's like, I smoke pot one time. I can try this. It's like, no, this is a whole different ballpark. This is a whole new different game. I think some people fall into that trap sometimes. It's bad, but it's like, I tried pot. It's cool. I can do all this other stuff as well. So stay off drugs, kids, because no mom wants to have to bury their son when they're 25. And that's one of the saddest things I've ever had to go through, is losing a friend to that. And it was shocking. You never know how to deal with death or anything like that. And it wrecked me for a good couple of months, like just all the time. I couldn't stop thinking about my buddy. So that's one thing. It's just, I try to, if I see that, just try to help him out and just talk to him a bit and just, hey, there's a way out. Honestly, I've been addicted to those drugs before. I've had to battle that. Thank God my mom had an intervention and made me apologize to all my family members and say, hey, excuse me, and say, hey, you've been a huge jackass. You need to apologize. You haven't been treating these people well, because when you're on drugs, that's all you think about all the time. So, yeah, a little deep, a little heavy.
No, I like that. We'll end it there. Thanks so much. Thanks a lot, Will. All right, many thanks goes out to Will Smith for coming on this episode. I had a great time chatting with him, getting to know him a little bit better, talking radio, talking sports talk radio. You don't find out a lot about what goes on behind the scenes unless you get an opportunity to chat with people like Will. So connect with him. All the links are going to be at imsaltlake.com/202 for episode 202. Connect with him on Facebook. Connect with I Am Salt Lake on Facebook and Twitter. That way you could stay up to date on everything I have going on. Always lots of stuff going on in the world of I Am Salt Lake. And you're going to want to stay connected there. Like I said, the next live show is Friday, January 22nd. I have a great evening planned with Kat Palmer, Jay Whitaker, Richie T. Stedman. Tickets are available at the door, only $5. Show starts at 8 o'clock. Club 50 West Broadway. Should be a really, really fun evening. So hopefully everybody's ready for the holidays. I'm going to have a brand new episode on Sunday. I'm here every week. It's absolutely free to subscribe to the podcast, so make sure to subscribe in iTunes. With that being said, again, my name is Chris Hollifield. Thank you so much for listening. You have a great week, and we'll see you again next time.